want it?
No, I mean, just if we need to refer to them, I might need to borrow them. I just realized.
She's got them better.
I didn't pop them in my bag. I have my bag was full of them, actually.
They're still
See
keeping
what
their
Carol's
eyes
been
on
up
it.
to.
They won't release it.
Oh, I've been up to
I think they might release it by Friday.
I gotta stop right. Next year I'm gonna.
Yeah, she did. I think
Stop right there.
that's what she should have.
Where I go and what I do.
You practice.
No, here we are.
16 years.
Man, thanks.
Falls down.
That's
Did you get my email, Shirley?
encouraging.
Yeah. I responded to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the October 23rd City Council meeting. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Brigham.
Here.
Vice Mayor Russell.
Here.
Councilmember Wolter.
Here.
Councilmember Bagby.
Present.
Mayor Palla.
Here.
And Student Liaison Eden.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any conflict of interest declarations from council members?
No.
Okay, seeing none. Agenda review. Any changes and or deletions to the agenda? None. Okay, seeing none. The next item is public comment. Any person wishing to speak to the City Council on any item not listed on the agenda may do so at this time. Members of the public have a right to speak on any item on the council agenda during that item. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the City Council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item not listed on the agenda. Each person wishing to speak must go to the podium when advised and speak directly into the microphone. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes, and each speaker is limited to speaking once under public comment. Would anybody like to address the City Council on any item not on the agenda?
Good evening, City Council and staff. My name is Marta Cruz, and I'm addressing the council and staff as a member of the Latino community in Cloverdale. When I first got to Cloverdale, I participated of the 2016 Binational Health Fair and Latino Celebration. I also was involved last year, and this year I was invited to be in the organizing committee. On Saturday, I was very surprised not to see any of the council members represented, only Council Wolter, who was there representing his re-election campaign. And I didn't see the police department like I did in the past. And I just want to bring to your attention that I feel it's important to be present and to say welcome to all members of the community, and also the fact that this is the event that Latinos organize in Cloverdale. I do understand that there are many other factors that need to be taken into account for staff and council members to be present, but we didn't get an answer that there was going to be absence. So I missed you guys, and I missed the police department because they had their community outreach person there, and kids were able to go through the cars and everything else. And we have received information in the past. So I just want to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for sharing those comments. And I'll just take a quick moment to just explain that I, as one council member, never received an invitation, nor was I contacted and asked to be there. We get invited to a lot of functions, and we do attend a lot, and it does get kind of overloaded at times. So it's important, I think, for any organization, not just this one. If you would like to have council representation, it's important to reach out to the mayor or the city manager and ask, so we can coordinate and try. Thank you.
And I did speak to the city.
Well, thank you. Okay, and that was more for the others, anybody that would like council representation at one of your functions. Thank you.
Excuse me?
Yes, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I have attended in years past, and we have had a table, and I've tabled in years past, and remember it fondly when it first came here. Unfortunately, I believe I sent you a note, Marta, that due to my wife's convalescence, I wasn't able to make it this year, but hopefully next year.
Okay, thank you. Any other council members have anything to say?
No.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else like to address the city council? Any item not on the agenda? This is the time to do so. Okay, seeing no one, yes, come on down, please sign the book, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Rick Caparetta. I'm representing Reach for Home. I'm the homeless outreach coordinator for Reach for Home, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my history and what we do. I've been homeless.
Could you speak into that mic because it's being recorded?
I've been homeless off and on my whole life. I was addicted to meth for 35 years. I was homeless all from San Francisco to Cloverdale. I came to Cloverdale and I went through the Walls House. I got into the emergency shelter, went to supportive housing, and now, today, I'm married. I have a house in Santa Rosa, and I pay my bills. So if I could do it, anybody could do it. And at Reach for Home, our services are outreach, emergency housing, rapid rehousing, and permanent supportive housing, and also Housing First, which Housing First is a new program that we take homeless individuals off the street, put them into housing, then we bring mental health, we bring all the services to them and help them, but the main thing is to get them off the streets first. We work with the Walls House, St. Vincent de Paul, Rotary, Grace Lutheran, and the Good Shepherd. We want to partner with the city of Cloverdale so we could help reduce the amount of homeless in this area. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And just so you're aware, we have a subcommittee that's working on this very issue, and it's on the agenda for October 25th at 6 p.m. So,
Make a comment?
yeah. So, Councilmember Rincon, please.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming and giving us a little update, but Reach for Home and other programs are available to the public on Tuesday mornings between 9:30 and 11:30 at the Catholic Church. And I've attended a couple of times now, and it's a really good program. I think with all of us working together and all of these outreach programs, and I was really happy to see you guys there. It's really a great addition to the community. I want to thank you.
And that meeting on Thursday, the 25th, is at 6 o'clock at the Senior Center, run on Main Street, Main and 3rd Street. So hopefully you can make it.
Okay. Thank you. Any other council members? No? Okay. Would anybody else like to address the city council on any item not on the agenda? Okay, seeing nobody rise, I'm going to close the public comment. We'll move on to the consent calendar. All items under consent calendar will be considered together by one action of the council unless council member or member of the public requests that an item be removed and considered separately. Would any council member like to have any items removed? Okay, would anybody from the public like to have any items removed? Okay, seeing none, we'll entertain a...
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move that we accept the consent calendar as submitted.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, so motion by Councilmember Wolter, second by Councilmember Brigham. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter,
Aye.
Councilmember Bagby,
Aye.
Mayor Palla,
Aye.
and Eden.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So we have no communications. The next item on the agenda, we have a public hearing. It's a public hearing for the consideration of a preliminary development plan, tentative map, and general plan amendment, and it's PTM GPA 046-2015 to change the land use designation of the project site for rural residential, which is RR, to low-density residential, LDR, for a 33-lot single-family residential subdivision known as Vista Oaks, previously known as the Vista View subdivision. City Manager, who's going to start that?
Mayor, council members, I'm going to turn over to Kevin Thompson, our Assistant City Manager, Community Development Director, for a presentation on this item.
Mayor, council members, yeah, this is a consideration of a mitigated neg deck, preliminary development plan, tentative map, and general plan amendment would establish 33 lots on 42 acres. As you know, this project has been around for a while. There's been several different iterations of the project that have come across your desk and before this body over the last several years. But this particular iteration has been to the Planning Commission twice. The first was in a workshop format where the Planning Commission offered many good, insightful questions and concerns and ways to actually make the project a lot better. During the second meeting, the applicant had responded to those Planning Commission concerns, and the Planning Commission was very happy with what the applicant had accomplished between the two meetings and voted 5-0 to recommend approval of the project. The applicant is here, and she's going to give a PowerPoint presentation. I'm just going to give a little bit of an introduction. So just one more point I'd like to make before I turn it over to Casey is that this is not the end for this project. It would have to come back for a precise development plan. So this is a preliminary development plan. The precise development plan includes things like architecture, landscaping, color of the home, placement of the home on the lot. So that would actually be required to go to the Planning Commission for review and a recommendation to the council. So it would come back before the council. I'd like to also add that we are suggesting to add one more condition of approval, which I put on the dais in front of you regarding indemnification. This is a typical condition that we put on subdivisions. It kind of slipped through the cracks, but we're suggesting that we include it as part of the approval process if approved tonight. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Casey Clement from Thompson Development to walk us through some of the details.
And Casey, that mic does come off if you want, but be sure to talk into it because it's being recorded.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor Palla, members of the City Council. My name is Casey Clement, and I represent the owners of the Vista Oaks subdivision. Is it breaking out a little bit, or no?
It's coming.
It's very slow.
I'd like to start by thanking city staff for all of their hard work over the last several years on the initial study for this project. And also for preparing the staff report this evening and for the Planning Commission hearings as well. We have our project team here tonight. The owner, Paul Thompson, is here, as well as our civil engineer, Kevin Doble of Doble, Thomas and Associates. So I'll start by talking a little bit about the site itself. Vista Oaks is a 42-acre hillside property just north of downtown. And just to give the audience a little, to help them place themselves here. So this is North Cloverdale Boulevard, and this is the famous Hamburger Ranch. Here's the entrance to the site. There's an existing emergency vehicle access road that traverses the site from east to west, entering here at North Cloverdale Boulevard and going uphill here and connecting through to the existing Vista View Drive. Before we bought the site, the previous owner actually did some illegal grading on the site, so there are some existing pads, I think 7 existing pads up there. And what we've tried to do with this plan is to make use of the existing topography as best as we could. The site was previously entitled with a 19-lot subdivision of semi-custom homes, quite large homes. 2,800 square feet was the smallest to 4,500 square feet. It was originally approved in 2005, and we went ahead and prepared the construction drawings for the project. So we really got our hands around the costs associated with the landslide repair for the site. And as I'm sure we all remember, the real estate market really fell out from under us. And by the time it came back, it was clear that there really wasn't a lot of confidence in the market that a semi-custom home community in Cloverdale would do well. In addition, the landslide repair, the extensive landslide repair that's associated with this project, for any project on this site, we realized that a 19-lot subdivision just really wouldn't justify all of that site work. So we assembled our team of market professionals and design professionals and thought, well, what would be a good subdivision? What would be a good project for Cloverdale in 2018? And we came up with the following design objectives. We wanted to diversify the housing type. We knew that we needed to increase the density to justify the landslide repair and site work associated with the project. But we also, as a balancing act, wanted to keep the total square footage equal to that of the 19-lot subdivision. So we would be increasing the density, but making the homes much smaller and thus more accessible. We also remembered from 10 years ago that, that visual impacts were a big concern for the citizens of Cloverdale. So we needed to take that into account. We also wanted to maintain the rural character of this site that we feel like is so important to Cloverdale's charm. So our new proposal for 2018 incorporates 33 lots. As I said, they're smaller, more accessible homes. We still did keep some, let's see, is this the pointer? So this is the entrance to the subdivision here, and what we've done is to increase the density right here at the entrance. And for those of you who have been to this site, I know it's a popular place to go walking. This is the area from which you can't see out of the site and you can't see into the site. So we knew that increasing density here would not increase the visual impact. And then we kept the same pads up here as these are the existing graded pads, and we kept the density pretty stagnant up at the top of the hill. Here's a side-by-side of the 19-lot subdivision and the 33-lot subdivision. And it just illustrates that the net square footage of residential space remains right at around 70,000 square feet. The size of the homes goes down substantially to 1,900 to 3,000 square feet, just a lot more accessible and a lot more appropriate for this market, I think. So we've conducted quite a bit of outreach already. In 2016, before we invested the money in an initial study and the civil engineer and landscape architect to bring all these plans together, we wanted to take the temperature of the community, get a general sense that there was a warm feeling about this type of use at this site. So we held, there was a planning and development subcommittee, a neighborhood meeting that we held just down the street, and then also a planning commission workshop. And most recently, there were 2 planning commission hearings, and at the last one, very happy to report that the commission unanimously recommended approval of the resolution. So we went over quite a few issues at the planning commission meeting, and this is a list that was put together in response to the first workshop. I won't be going over all of these items here today, though I do have slides if you have specific questions, but staff has asked me tonight to talk about really the 2 biggest issues of concern, which is site stability and the visual impact. So understandably, our neighbors want to know, how will this development impact the overall stability of the hill? Will it increase runoff? And who's responsible for the correct installation of the mitigation measures and the landslide repair? And I'm going to ask our civil engineer, Kevin Doble, to come up and talk a little bit about drainage and stormwater.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, Kevin Doble, Doble Thomas and Associates. I'll just be brief. What I'm going to cover here is just basically what measures we're required to put in place and how we're going to achieve that. The city has a requirement. It's adopted by, it's a mandate by the State Water Board that you have low impact development. Now what is that? That is basically that you take the stormwater from your site and you capture it and you treat it before it's released. You also control the volume in which leaves the site, so you're mimicking the pre-developed conditions. In this case, the city will require strict drainage control measures as a condition of approval, and there are actually 3 conditions of approval in the project staff report that address this. The drainage plans and calculations, they shall indicate the following conditions before and after development. So basically we need to do a pre-developed drainage analysis and a post-development drainage analysis, and that's how we quantify how we're treating and capturing the runoff. And that the quantities of water and the rates of water to major water courses off-site are not impacted. So we actually have to do an off-site assessment of how we're addressing that. And then that, of course, the pre-development and post-development runoff rates are limited to the pre-development flows, and that requires us to have facilities on site. We're going to be using oversized storm drains, which actually hold water and meter it out over a slower period of time. And that will mimic the pre-developed condition. How we do that, interceptor trees, planting hundreds of new trees. Trees are beneficial, and we have slides that we can go into more detail later, but basically trees pick up the rainfall. They also, so they shorten the path of the rainfall to hit the ground. That's less disturbance. They also take up water. We have vegetated buffer strips, which actually filter the water from the streets and the paved areas before they go into the storm drain system. We're going to employ disconnected downspouts, where we'll actually take the downspouts, route them to appropriate drainage features before they're discharged to the storm drain system. Those drainage features include bioretention areas, rain gardens. So those are our primary measures for controlling drainage. And I have fact sheets on each one of these. If there are questions about this later on in the program, we're happy to answer those. I think that's it. Thank you.
So next, I'd like to talk about the landslides on the site, and just really highlight just how much studies have been conducted on this site. Over 100 test borings have been taken on the site, and which is, they go in, they dig a hole, they bring the dirt up, and then they analyze it, and depending on what they find, they make recommendations for how to stabilize the site, what types of foundations need to be used. And last time, during the last entitlement process in 2004, the city actually hired a third-party geotechnical engineer, Kleinfelder, to conduct their own 24 test bits and then also do a peer review of the Bauer and Associates report. So I'm not going to go through and read all this to you, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what this looks like. In the geotech report, there are 17 existing landslides on site here. And for each specific landslide, the geotechnical engineer has a very detailed description of what should be done for each landslide based on the conditions of that specific landslide. So for example, landslide number 3, which is the largest landslide on site, says a landslide 3 is a significant subtle dormant landslide. By over-excavating the landslide debris from the toe of the landslide up to the roadway and rebuilding the slope with subsurface drainage and engineered fill, the factor of safety for the overall landslide is increased from about 1 to 2.2. So these 17 landslides exist on the site currently. So it is an unstable hillside, but what we're proposing to do is to come in and bring in private money and actually make this hillside more stable. Now I'll talk briefly about the visibility study. There have been 3D models taken from 2 points on the valley floor. Viewpoint 1 is the apartment across from the Vineyard Valley Inn on North Cloverdale Boulevard. And then the second viewpoint is from the southwest corner of the high school baseball diamond. And if you're walking around downtown Cloverdale, you're really hard-pressed to find a point from which you can view that hillside. So we really had to go somewhere where there was big open space like this. And they're all looking northeast at the site. So this is on North Cloverdale Boulevard, looking at the site, current conditions. And then this is the first model that was presented at the first Planning Commission hearing that caused a little heartburn, because as you can see here, you can see some roof lines here. And so the Planning Commission asked us to go back and take a look at that and address that. So between the two hearings, our landscape architect revised his plan to include additional vegetation and planting, and there was quite a bit of back and forth with the 3D modeler and the landscape architect to screen the homes. So I've circled here, you see more vegetation, you don't see roof lines. And then the Planning Commission also asked us to do a second point of view. So this was not at the first Planning Commission hearing, but it was at the second. And here's from the baseball diamond, looking up at the project site. And then this is incorporating the additional landscaping and the project. So let me just go back and forth here. Kind of cool. But I'd like to end by talking a little bit about the public benefits for this project, because understandably, when a builder comes into town and says, you know, we'd like to build a subdivision, people want to know, well, what's in it for us? And I think that's a good question. As I said, there are 17 existing landslides on this site, so by building the subdivision, we'll be actually stabilizing this hillside and managing the stormwater flow. In addition, in a tight housing market, when housing prices are really high, if people agree that we need more houses, that we want prices to come down, the city's not in the business of building houses. So they rely on outside investment, on folks to come in and present a proposal, and we have this nice back and forth and come up with a project that we can all really be proud of. And then lastly, I'd just like to point out that the development impact fees for this project will total nearly $1 million, including $200,000 for Quimby fees, which goes into parks and recreation. Also, there's money for water capacity, wastewater capacity, to make sure that, to account for the impact that this project might have, and important things like fire facilities, and streets and thoroughfares. And I think that's all I have. But we are here to answer questions as they come up. Thank you.
Okay, does that end the presentation? Okay, thank you. If we could move this screen and put this up, if we could. Questions from council?
No, not at the moment.
Wait. Wait.
Wait.
Wait. Okay, this is a public hearing. I'd like to open the public hearing. If you have any questions or comments on this project, this is your time to come up and please voice them. So if you would, when you come to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes. Would you please sign the book, but your 3 minutes won't start until you start to speak. So sign the book first and state your name for the record, please.
Luciano Toninato, 299 Shahan Drive. Honorable Mayor Palla and City Council. Did you receive my packet, by the way? In 1992, Stephen Bates proposed a 40-lot development. The Planning Commission required an EIR to be conducted. He refused, and the application was denied without prejudice by the Planning Commission. I think I remember the legend there, Bob Jordan, being in the Planning Commission then. In November '99, a revised application for 20 lots was received by the city. I think the owner was Mr. Neighbor, but the same gal, I think, represented him then. The application was not completed until August 2000, inclusive of the EIR, and it can be found on file, EIR 800, submitted by John Hankel, Community Development Director, dated September 27, 2000. The EIR indicates that all 20 lots will impact sensitive soil areas, a prompt regrading and stabilization All the unstable slopes will need to be reconstructed, revegetated, drainage features installed, and incur other measures which in essence would not result in a shape or a natural appearing slope. The city hired a different engineering firm to do a peer review of the EIR, that was Kleinfelder. The peer report identifies 8 existing slides area around the proposed development sites. I know that there's 17 altogether. Areas of being concerned in question if lot number 2 was even buildable, and I think ultimately it was dropped. And identify several concerns in areas in and around lots 3, 4, 5, 12.
You have 1 minute, please.
19 and 20, and wonders if it's feasible for these lots to be built on. Now, was an EIR down on the additional 14 lots, and are the regular 19 lots on the same area that they were first proposed? And if not, was it an EIR down on that? And if so, was it that I received peer review? As to the credibility of the developer with the fire of Fauna Grove and devastation that we all are witness to, I asked the city manager on June 29 to see if the property owner would follow existing ordinance and abate weeds and waist-high grasses near our fence lines. The city manager did so. The developer agreed to do it. It's now October 23rd, and many laughable excuses. Nothing has been done. I received an email from them last week asking if they could use my property to accept their sites.
Okay.
4 months late.
Lou, if you could sum it up, please.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting right to that.
Okay.
Okay, so the main questions are, is the due diligence going to be done on the EIR on the 33 sites now, as it was done to begin with? And what about the PG and the lines are going to be underground? And my last thing was that the original developer in 2005 promised to put a 500,000-gallon water tank and also put 3 trees for every 1 tree that's being removed.
Okay.
Now, the water tank issue is something, I'm going to stop here in a second, it's something that's very near and dear our heart because we just went through that.
That's right.
So I hope that you guys will keep that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Would you like to address some of those questions regarding the EIR? Yeah. And the water tank and those types of, the trees?
I think the question of whether an EIR was appropriate or not might be better addressed by the initial study consultant, who's a third-party consultant hired by the city.
Yeah. Could you address the tank? Is there a water tank? Yeah, please.
I believe in the past there was discussions about a water tank to increase storage capacity for the system that at the time wasn't being looped into the existing system to the south. It was just being connected at Vista View Drive. But the new proposal and the proposal that was approved in 2006 and the improvement plans that were designed actually took it one step further and took the water line from basically Cloverdale Boulevard at Hamburger Ranch all the way down into the system, and so it creates a full loop, which actually is more beneficial than a water tank because it bolsters not only pressure but storage in that system. So it was a much more extensive improvement that was proposed.
Thank you. And on the trees?
Yeah, well, in addition, the water tank was discussed as a condition of approval for the last project, but it wasn't eventually included in the tentative map approval. And with the trees, typically I have my landscape architect here to talk specifically about this, but he's never been asked any questions, so he's not here tonight. But we have maxed out the number of additional trees that we can plant on the site because this property is under the WUI policy, Wildland Urban Interface. You can only have so many trees, especially in the defensible boundary, but we have maxed out the number of trees that we can replant on this site. Right, a fire code requirement. Was there anything else?
No, that's good, thank you. And then on the EIR, did you want to just address that briefly? Please state your name for the record.
Good evening, council members. My name's Mary Bean. I'm a director at First Carbon Solutions. So we prepared the mitigated negative declaration under contract with the city. So I take my direction from Kevin and David and Raphael. And that's a standard practice under CEQA. So there isn't a reason to do a separate peer review of that. We did prepare the initial study checklist to determine whether an EIR would be the appropriate document or whether a mitigated negative declaration would be appropriate. So the document before you is a mitigated neg dec, and that's the appropriate document for the
Thank you so much. Okay. Okay, the public hearing still open. Would anyone else like to address the city council on this item? Please come forward and sign the book and state your name for the record. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Mike Cooper, and I want to apologize first because I'm operating from a great deal of ignorance since I've only been here a month. But there were 2 things that came up during the presentation that caught my attention. One was what's going to happen to the water treatment system and what's going to happen to the sewage treatment system. And my question is really probably for someone from staff, and that is, how does this affect the percentage usage of the capacity in the 2 treatment plants, water and wastewater?
Okay, thank you. Somebody from staff like to address that? City engineer.
The water system is designed to treat for up to a population of 12,000 people, so we're far from that, even with this development.
So the
likewise,
the system's capable of handling it?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would anybody else like to address the city council on this item? Yes.
Good evening. I'm Shirley Davis, so I'm going to speak to you as a planning commissioner. After the June 5th meeting with the Planning Commission, I talked with, visited with the residents who were expressing their concerns. They communicated it. And of course, I came up with the landslides and drainage. So what I'm suggesting, just for the assurance of all these residents, could we just have a registered professional engineer or geologist to come in at certain times of the project when certain earth is being moved and manipulated, to come in and take a look at it, just to be sure it's done correctly? That's my suggestion.
Okay. Thank you. Was that something that was discussed at the Planning Commission? Well, as a condition, or? No. Okay, all right. I just wanted clarification.
I found out some information.
No, come back up, please.
I found out some more information during my visits, especially Luciano's house. There's been a landslide behind that property, and it was in the Reveille, evidently. Okay. It was big enough. So right. With that, I can just see why they're so concerned. Landslides and drainage. I mean, I feel we have a responsibility to these residents.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Kevin, did you want to address that?
I'm happy to if I may. I think anytime a project like this happens, there are requirements for construction observation, inspections, and reporting. And all of those reports are run through the city engineer's office. So we actually have, we have to have a final report that states that what was constructed not only conforms to the plans, but if there are changes, those are documented, so those are part of the record drawings. And we also have to have a final soils report that demonstrates how they achieved what they intended to do and where those various components are located.
Thank you.
There's actually a mitigation measure that's included in the initial study. It's mitigation measure GO1, and it says prior to issuance of building permits, let's see, The recommendations of a design-level geotech investigation. All soil engineering recommendations and structural foundations shall be designed by a licensed professional engineer. And all on-site soil engineering activities shall be conducted under the supervision of a licensed geotechnical engineer or certified engineering geologist.
Great, thank you for clarifying that.
I'm Richard Green. I live on Triplet Drive in North Main Street. I have a concern about the traffic that's going to be generated possibly by using Vista View. Maybe you can shed some light on that for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Casey, did you want to address that traffic on Vista View?
We do have a slide, the EVA slide.
Well, it's my understanding it's not a through street. It's going to be closed off to traffic. Is that correct?
Yes, so 32 of the 33 lots will be accessed off of North Cloverdale Boulevard, and there will be a cul-de-sac at the end there. And then an EVA road that goes through to Vista View Drive. And there was some concern from our neighbors about folks going onto that EVA area and, you know, causing mischief. So what we've proposed to do is put in unlocked bollards, if that's appropriate, if the city thinks that's appropriate, in the fire department, so that folks can still have pedestrian access, but there would be no vehicular access. And then there's one lot that gets access off of the existing Vista View Drive. Does that answer the question?
I think so. Thank you. Okay, the public hearing's still open. Does anybody else want to address the City Council on this item? Please come forward.
Hi, my name's Janessa Wheeler. My house at 113 K Court backs up to this property. I'm pretty concerned about the water runoff. We bought in 2016, January, one of our heaviest rain years. And as I'm painting the interior of my house, I look out back and the creek is going higher and higher and higher. I run to my neighbor's house and he says, "Oh, it's fine, it looks good." And since then we've had to repair a bunch of French drains, cleared the creek out some more. There is a lot of mudslides in this area. You can see them from our backyard. Oftentimes I'm home alone with my son, who's 8 months old, and I'm just concerned about the water runoff. Another concern of mine is the fire danger right now. The land is overgrown. It's been a concern of mine for a while. Lou and I have talked about it a lot. I've cleared a lot of my land, but it backs up to a lot of overgrown brush and trees. And again, playing single mom a lot, it's a little nerve-wracking with all the fires in this area. So if that's something that could be addressed, that would be awesome.
Thank you. Okay. Would you like to address the water runoff and vegetation?
So with the water runoff, I'd probably point to the low-impact development standards that Kevin was talking about, that we have to prove that there will be no new net runoff, and the way they do that, the way that we do that, is with detention basins, the interceptor trees, some of the items that Kevin was talking about, and he can go into more detail on that if you'd like. But to talk about the fire danger and clearing out our defensible spaces with our neighbors, this is an issue that's definitely been on my radar. I certainly have not been resting on my laurels. We got notice about this several months ago and immediately cleared the EVA road, because finding someone to do that, you know, was relatively simple. That same person was unwilling to clear our defensible space with our neighbors, because they said that it could actually inadvertently start a fire in the process of trying to stop it. So then I met with Goats R Us, which is a company out of the East Bay who brings goats out. And they did end up giving me a price several weeks ago, and it was $25,000. And so now I'm looking at different options. But I do realize that this is an issue that will persist, and the homeowners association will need to have an annual contract with the landscape, with a gardener who can take care of this. So that, yeah, that's what's going on with that. Would you like to hear more about the water runoff, or was that, did I address that to your?
Yeah. Thank you.
I know this, thank you. I know this is definitely a concern of everybody's, and I know they're seeing issues downstream of this property. There's no doubt. We analyzed the pre-existing condition. The fact of the matter is the property was graded without care and without know-how by a previous owner, without a permit. And it's been sitting there like that, and none of there's no drainage control measures in place at all. And at this point, that's what needs to happen with the property. And we're hoping through the course of this process that we do that in addition to combining the requirements of the city to make sure we demonstrate how we do that. There's also a homeowners association that will ensure that it's being maintained properly and it's working the way it's supposed to. So that's our assessment of it, pre-development and post-development, is that we're dealing with an existing condition that we understand has runoff impact issues, but there are no drainage controls on that site right now.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to address the City Council? Come forward, please.
My name is Jerry Spitzer, 275 Shahan Drive, Cloverdale, California. Pretty much these concerns that the people have come up and spoke about are my concerns. One other concern that has just come up to me, I was not understanding that the access to this subdivision was going to be off of Cloverdale Boulevard North. If that access, if I'm reading this right, is right across from the Hamburger Ranch, if that is correct, I think that we have a serious traffic problem to look at before we okay this site. If I'm incorrect, I'd like to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Was there a traffic study done on this?
Again, Mary Bean, First Carbon Solutions. So yes, W-Trans, Whitlock and Weinberger Transportation Consultants, performed a traffic study looking at local intersections.
Can you speak up?
Oh, sorry. Whitlock and Weinberger, a local transportation consulting firm, prepared a traffic study looking at local intersections, both in the existing conditions and with the introduction of the project. All of the intersections locally are currently operating at acceptable levels, either A or B, and that's on a scale of A through F, and would remain so even with the project. So would not come close to being unacceptable conditions at any intersection.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would anybody else like to address the City Council on this item?
Mayor, Council, if I can, I just want to direct your attention to the environmental document that was prepared for the project, as Mary Bean pointed out. There is a letter that was provided by the California Department of Transportation that spoke to the issue of traffic safety, particularly at the entrance, and the initial study does identify appropriate mitigation for that potential impact.
Okay.
So
thank you.
It was a concern that was raised during review of the project and was addressed in the environmental document.
Thank you for that. Okay, the public hearing is still open. Would anybody else like to address the City Council? Please come forward.
My name is John Putnam. I live at 111 K Court, and I too am concerned mostly about the fire hazard. And I think that there's no time to waste to clearing out that hill. I live right below, and if the developer here is considering their options, I'd appreciate if they could get on to that fire hazard immediately, since it's a very dangerous season. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Michelle Winterbottom. So I just wanted to clarify, that traffic study was done on the previous, the 2005, or was that done recently? I'm just trying to clarify when that was done, and if it was done with most of the traffic going up Cloverdale Boulevard rather than through Vista View like it was before. And also, I know that Shahan, that area, had major issues with water and landslides, and if everything will be corrected with this development.
Okay, thank you. We'll get some answers. Okay, would you like to address that?
Sure. Mary Bean again. So yes, there was a traffic study done previously in 2004 or 5. And so as part of this process in 2017 and 18, we reevaluated the intersections to reconfirm existing conditions and to do those same computations to ensure that the results were still valid. And updating it from the 19 lots, which is what was studied before, to now evaluate the 33 lots that are proposed today.
Okay, thank you. All right. Would anybody else like to address the City Council on this item? Okay. Why don't you come back down here, please, and ask your question one more time, and we'll get you an answer.
One of the major concerns was the water and the landslides that were happening in the Shahan and Heidi Lane issues when they graded without permits and things. And I want to know if that's going to be corrected with this development.
Thank you. Kevin, do you want to address that with the landslides?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Yeah, every landslide on this property is going to be corrected. We can't correct landslides that are not on our property, but we can certainly repair and remediate the landslides that are on this particular parcel, and I think we intend to do that.
Could you speak into the mic a little bit? There you go.
Straight in. Every landslide that's on the property will be repaired as part of this project. That's the requirements of the CEQA document, it's the requirements of the mitigated neg deck, it's the requirements of the soils engineers and the peer reviewers. We cannot correct, we will not be repairing landslides, or our clients at this point would not be repairing landslides that are off the property. I don't believe that's part of the scope of the review. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. Before I close the public hearing, would anybody else like to address the City Council on this item? Okay, seeing no one rise, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the city. Yes, sir. Come on down and, okay. If anybody else wants to start thinking, 1 second, please. Anybody else, if you'd like to address the City Council, please come on down and sign the book, because we're going to be moving on right after this. Okay, state your name for the record, please.
James Toninato. Better not yell too loud, blow your guys' ears out.
Yeah.
I wanted to say first, I support my father, Luciano.
Speak into the mic, please.
About his concerns. I lived there on 299 Shahan Drive for 20 years and witnessed some of these landslides and the runoff coming off those hills, and it is not pretty. It can be very violent at times, especially in one canyon in particular. And we do all the residents here live with the eyesore on the other side of that hill, and that was supposedly done under due diligence as well, and look what we're left with. I did hear questions about different paperwork, and my father asked one question in particular, and it was dodged. I heard another question, dodged. You can go up on the hill and witness the overgrowth along property lines that this developer has not taken care of, and they've had plenty of time to deal with this. As a citizen in this town, I can tell you there are more viewpoints than the two that were pointed out today. You can drive over on the boulevard, look over Inbox, the old Inbox location, and see that entire hillside. So anybody coming into town is going to see that. If we're talking about using an entrance on the boulevard across from the Hamburger Ranch. Years ago, Ray Rickard was killed right there. Same coming out of the old two-story house that was located just to the north of this entrance. He pulled out in front of a diesel rig going to the sawmill because he couldn't see him, was killed. There was another accident there within the last 15 years as well. I just don't remember who that was. But it was a very serious incident as well. So unless you remove that whole hill, you can't see what's coming there. From the opposite side, a Hamburger Ranch, sure you can. And now, maybe I'm wrong, maybe we're not talking about an entry over there. And if I misunderstood, then I did, but that's a serious concern.
Okay, great, thank you.
My name's Eric Peterson at 298 Shahan Drive. I have some concerns about the traffic, but I also, on the back of my property, I have 2 easements which water comes down from Tom Monato's and from the west side of me. There are times that it's a drainage ditch, two drains that come down, goes into about a 16-inch culvert. I've been maintaining that for 39 years. I would like to know, on the water problem, are they going to mitigate the water problem that goes from them down to other properties below them, like through my property? Thank you.
Thank you. Did somebody want to address that question?
Sure, I'd be happy to address actually both speakers' questions. I believe the first speaker was referring to site distance and pulling out of the driveway. We have, after reviewing the staff report and the mitigations, we actually went through and prepared a design to show that we have site distance, and we're even increasing the site distance to 500 feet in both directions. The way we're doing that is we're widening the throat of that opening to the existing access drive, and we are shaving back the hillside and putting in a retaining wall, which will improve site distance to the west. We have slides that we can present to you tonight that show those diagrams if you wish to see them. And I believe the second question was related to impacts to downstream waterways. We're required to actually not increase the runoff for those larger storms to the downstream properties, and the way we do that is we're going to hold the water back. We're going to let it out over a slower period of time, so we're not going to just dump it all into those drainage ways off-site. We would not be allowed to do that by city ordinance. And we have to demonstrate that we can satisfy those requirements in our plans and reports. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay, anybody else want to address the City Council on this item before we close the public hearing? Okay, seeing no one rise, I'm going to close the public hearing, bring it back to City Council. Who would like to start?
Well, I guess I'll start.
Okay, Councilmember.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, you know, geez, where do I start with this? Kevin, I know that you're the mayor of the city of Ukiah, and you've been on the council for a few years now. And so you kind of know where I'm coming from. I'm looking out for our city. And Alyssa and Marshall, I know we need houses in Cloverdale. There is a housing shortage. I'm just not sure that this is the project that we need. So I've got about 5 or 6 questions here, but Casey, if you could walk us through what's the process? You're coming in, once you get all the permits, are you then going to sell the parcel to a developer, or are you and the current owner actually going to do the grading and everything, the building, the whole 9 yards?
Good evening. My name is Paul Thompson. I'm one of the owners of the property. It is our intention to develop the property ourselves. Now, we will, of course, hire subcontractors to do the grading and the excavation and drainage work.
Okay. And while you're up there, then, just another question. Do you have any hillside building experience?
I own a construction company based down in Novato, and we do extensive civil projects, heavy engineering, buildings, wastewater plants. Yes.
On hillsides?
Correct.
Okay. You know, I guess I'm having a hard time getting my arms around building 33 homes on a hill that has 17 slides. I hear that you're going to mitigate every single one of those slides before we even issue a building permit. And I'm hoping that if this project goes through, that we're going to have a geotech person come in and make sure they were done properly. You know, I'm a little concerned. Also, Casey, you mentioned that there was the public benefit of the city getting at least $1 million in fees. That's not spendable money for us. That's reimbursing the water department and the sewer department for the infrastructure that we've already done. It's reimbursing the city for the staff time and for the hard labor that we've put into it. So it's not a windfall of money like you make it out to be. You and I met, I believe it was last week, and we discussed a few issues that I had. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself. My big issue is this is above the 400-foot level that the city has for its zoning. And I'm concerned that we might be setting a precedence that once we allow one development to come in and go over 400 foot, we're letting other developers come in and do the same thing. We also, and I know I'm getting ahead of myself, Casey, we talked about the Quimby Act funds, and my preference would be for you to do some type of a playground up there. I don't think kids should be coming down in front of Hamburger Ranch, going down Cloverdale Boulevard and trying to get to the playgrounds. And there's nothing for them to come out the other end. There needs to be some type of a playground up there. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. And you know, like I said, you have to help me get to yes on this because I'm just not comfortable with it. The hill is sliding. Last winter, across from Hamburger Ranch, there was this green muck that came down from the hill, and it was on that north side of the road there until it was actually plowed out of the way. So there's some issues there. That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you. Okay. Councilmember, okay. Councilmember Brigham.
Well, Gus asked a couple questions that I was going to ask, but my big question is, okay, so you've gone through a lot of work on this, I can see that. So you fix the slides, build the houses up there, we get a horrible winter, horrible slide happens, takes out Lou's house or a couple other houses. How big of a bond? I think it was $10 million. There's a $10 million bond that's going to be run by the HOA. What happens after that? What happens if it takes out 4 or 5 houses? $10 million, the road, everything else. I'm confused a bit as the liability of building on those hillsides. What will happen to the people down on Shahan if there's only $10 million to spread around? How can we protect these neighbors from a very, very, very unstable hillside?
Okay. Would you like to address it? Yes. You're welcome to respond. Thank you.
So the slides, that is a very good concern and an understandable concern from our neighbors. The slides that are currently there are there regardless of what we do. So us coming in and actually stabilizing it will be actually stabilizing the hillside. But in the event that there is some type of a construction defect type thing,
right.
California law requires that the contractor is actually liable for the first 10 years of the development. And then going forward, the HOA has CC&Rs and also an operating budget and a legal fund, so then they would be liable going forward from there. But you brought up the issue of a $10 million bond. Is that being made a condition of approval of the project? Yes.
I thought so,
yeah,
from what I
I just wasn't sure what the amount was.
But $10 million doesn't go very far in this day and age. And so that worries me, and we have to protect the people who already live here. That's our number one goal. So I'm just trying to figure out litigation-wise, I mean, people would be suing all over the place. So maybe the city attorney could give me a little help. When the 10 million's gone, what then?
So I think what then would, insurance would start to fight it out, I'm guessing. The folks whose homes, if there was damage from a slide, homeowners insurance would likely cover that. That's why people have homeowners insurance. So that's one thing. There could also be, you could up the amount of that bond if the council desired to make that a different condition of approval on the tentative map. Typically, there's also a subdivision improvement agreement that is entered into between the developer and the city, and then there's additional bonds that go with that agreement, but those typically run out, I think, a couple years after the public improvements are finished, but you could attempt to tie that bond as well to some sort of damage that happens to the landside mitigation improvements. If you wanted to wrap that in as well, that could be one extra layer of protection.
Yeah, this is Paul Thompson again. I just want to add, there's several layers of protection for the public. There's going to be the bond you mentioned, there's going to be the contractors, all the subcontractors' insurance policies, and there's going to be the homeowners' policies. All are going to have high limits, and so there's the amount of protection that's going to be available compared to what's now is going to be night and day.
Okay, now I understand that you're mitigating everything, and I get that. But I'm thinking in 3 years, 4 years, whatever, if we just get a really bad winter.
Right, and that is a possibility, but again, all the homeowners are going to have their policies with their liability. There's going to be...
Yeah.
And then we have the construction has a 10-year liability tail. And every contractor that works out there, the plumbers, the grading contractors, the underground contractors, they all have policies.
Sure. So one solution might be to up that bond.
Yes.
Okay. The only reason I'm asking that is because I got a little nervous when I kept getting emails about the fact that there was no fire protection on that hillside, that you didn't get the goats, you didn't get anybody to cut the weeds, and fire scares me more than water here. And so I found that disinterest to the neighbors really kind of bothered me. But go ahead, and we can think some more, but go ahead.
So, well, I just want to follow up on the question that you asked. When you mentioned the contractors have insurance, and usually it's not quite that easy. Usually it ends up in litigation, and you end up in court, and in the meantime, the damage is done, and people are struggling trying to, and have to get an attorney. So it's not quite that easy. So my concern is clearly there on the potential impacts. So I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, thank you. You said what I was about to say, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, these things are not that clean. We all know that. Could drag on for years and years and have all kinds of agonies. Just talk to anybody who went through the fire. I certainly support Councilmember Brigham's suggestion that the bond be increased. I'm very concerned about that. I have to tell you that when I first reviewed this, and then when I met with Casey briefly, I was very excited, and I still am in many ways, but the more I read, and yes, I did go through all whatever
it was
pages.
long.
I do that, yeah. So far, though, I didn't find a typo, which is unusual for me. But in going through it, I had to confess I had some concerns. And my biggest concern, though, is whether any of this can actually be assured. I don't think it can. I think every time we do something, we run the problem of triggering something else. And my only concern is that we have the ability to get the best opinion we possibly can about the landslides in particular. And the other thing I'm very worried about, and I went up there and took a look at it again to convince myself, I'm concerned about the entrance and the Hamburger Ranch. That bothers me, because Hamburger Ranch is one of those places that pulls two kinds of folks, either people who go there all the time and pay no attention to anything like me, or folks who've never been here before and are coming off the road, and they don't know what to expect. So I want to make sure that if that is an acceptable entrance, which it appears to be, and maybe the only one really that will work, that we do whatever we possibly can with that traffic study. And I don't want to wait to get it. I want to see what's happening with it as soon as possible and know what all the negatives might be. So I really, really have a worry about that. You brought up something with the hill, sir, that I hadn't thought about. So I accept the fact that you had some mitigation for that and hope that works. But other than that, in terms of bringing homes here that people will be interested in, particularly, frankly, younger people raising families, I'm excited about that, and I want it to work. But I also want it to be as safe as it possibly can be. If we can get some answers with that, that will be great. And I also want to have real independence and make sure we know who it is who signs off on these things ultimately. That we really understand what their background is. You know, I know they're registered and yada yada, but I've worked too much with everybody from CPAs to attorneys to architects in my life. And I know they vary staggeringly in ability, even though they all have apparently the same credentials. So I want to make sure that the city is aware of it and our attorneys are. And I also would like us to get as much advice as we possibly can from our attorneys and our financial folks about what some of the problems may be. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a couple of things I want to. I'm sorry.
I just had a couple of.
Go ahead, please. Councilmember Bagby.
Sorry, just three things came up in response to some of the comments. First of all, I just want to recognize and state out loud that we're not going to have these slide issues and the water issues addressed unless there is development there. Okay, so it's just the slide water ferry is not going to come along and repair this for us. It's going to be a property owner, and the only way they're going to do that is if they can develop this property. So I just think that we need to be realistic about this. Secondly is that I think we do need to do a better job of addressing the entrance and exit at Hamburger Ranch. That is yet another example of a Cloverdale Street that Caltrans wants to continue to be a freeway. We need traffic calming. We need to narrow that road, and we need to improve that so that it is bicycle and pedestrian friendly. And I think there is a picture in our packet of widening that entrance and putting the retaining walls in. I think that that's a great start, but that's a huge issue with people coming up and over off of 128, coming up and over that hill. And so I would like to see some improvement there. And then just lastly, I'm not really comfortable with saying I don't think the bond is enough. I don't think the bond is, or I think the bond is too high or too low. It needs to be based on what the actual, surrounding. We need to identify the properties that are at risk and get a number, and based on that, not an arbitrary 10 million or I like 20 million. Correct. It needs to be based on actual facts. So that's all I had.
Good, thank you. Okay, so now I have a couple of comments. The first one is I'd like maybe if you could, our assistant city manager, maybe to just talk a little bit about this indemnification that we just received, because I always look at what happens, what if 10 years down the road, and what risk does the city stand on this if this thing went forward. So can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Mayor, we're going to ask, I'll address first, and then we'll ask our city attorney. Yeah. For the audience, what we're referring to is an indemnification clause. Indemnification clause is often required by cities as part of a approval of tentative map. It's intended to ensure that the developer indemnifies the town or indemnifies the city associated with potential litigation, including the council and the officers. And we think it's important enough to include as part of the conditions of approval tonight, should you decide to move forward with this project, and make it a condition of approval of the proposed tentative map. But to speak more specifically about indemnification, I'll turn it over to the city attorney.
It's pretty standard indemnification provision. It's a condition of approval on the tentative map, but if the council, to add another layer, because this project does not have a development agreement with it, which some cities do, development agreements which would have other indemnifications that then run with the land later. You know, this goes with the tentative map, and then later a final map will be filed. So, and you don't typically put conditions like this on a final map. So it's probably, you know, it's not unheard of, or this suggestion, it's a little last minute, but it might be a good idea to, you could add another condition that requires the developer to enter into an agreement with the city that runs beyond the tentative map after the final map's filed, that addresses the indemnification issue and, you know, gets into the particulars on the contractors, the subs, the oversight, those things that are coming up tonight.
So would there be a requirement for each person based on this that purchases one of those 33 homes to, through a disclosure when they sign all the, you know, the hundreds of papers that they sign, when you buy a property, that they would be knowing beforehand that they're living in an area that's subject to slides, that they are, that the city is, you know, they're acknowledging that the city's indemnified and that they're buying into that and understanding that?
We
Is
can
that
make that a condition if it's, you know,
Well,
I'm assuming that there might be some requirements, and I'm not an engineer, so there might already be requirements, disclosure like that in California law. I'm guessing there are if you're building on a hillside.
I think I can answer that. In the documents that get recorded that are part of any purchase of one of those lots would be a copy of the final map, the CCNRs. There would be references to city files and the final geotechnical report. And that final geotechnical report would state what they repaired, how they repaired it, and to what level of safety and satisfaction it was repaired. So everyone that purchased a home and they were doing the review of the background documents, that would be part of a disclosure package that went with the purchase of those lots.
So just from my standpoint, the comfort level is really not there because there's 17 repairs, and if one fails 10 years down the road, it's going to become a community problem that we're going to have to deal with. And I think that would put us in a position that we're going to have to work as a community to try to fix something. And so that's just my one concern. The other concern I have is on the HOA. And the ability, I mean, I'm not clear, I'm familiar with how, you know, CCNRs are only enforceable if somebody wants to enforce them. Bring in attorneys, you take them to court. Typically, when you have homeowners associations where you have a manager, staff, a board that regulates it, and, you know, a lot of that vegetation that you showed and all that's going to need maintenance. We're talking a private road, and there's going to be times where that road's going to need repairs. There's going to be a lot of work that's going to be needed. We talked about money. Should there be some kind of a slide or some, you know, needs to do things. And I'm just not comfortable, you know, in 5 years, if there's no enforcement, no management of that, it's going to again come back to the city to try to work through this maze of problems that are happening in an area. So I'm just not comfortable with that approach based on the complexity of this problem or this project here. It just seems to me, I could see in time as all the contractors go away and everybody's living there and then we have these things happening, it's going to come right back to the city to try to mitigate some of these problems if they surface. And so I'm just going to share that thoughts.
Can I?
Yes, please.
Just one more question. Kevin, you alluded a couple times to the fact that you were just going to repair the slides that are on your property. You weren't going to take care of any other slides. Is there something you're alluding to there?
Only that I heard some neighbors say that they maybe had slides on their property. Okay. That was what I was referring to. I'm not aware of those because we didn't study the property, or I don't have a geotechnical report on those properties. Okay. But I'm just referring to the property that's under the control of our client, and what we're instructed to do by the geotechnical engineer when we prepare our plans has to do with just the landslides that are on this particular parcel.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from council?
I have a question for Kevin.
Yes.
Sorry, Kevin, just to follow up. So do you think, I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but is it your opinion as a professional engineer, are some of the slides that might be below your property, could they be caused by the lack of good drainage that's on your property? I know that's a tough question.
I don't think I could answer that professionally,
Yeah.
because I really don't know, because we don't do the geology or the geotechnical engineering. We just take their recommendations and prepare the plans.
Okay.
We could certainly get answers to those questions. You know, there's more phases to this project. For example, the next step is a precise development plan. The precise development plan, I assure you, will have very detailed drawings related to how we repair the landslide, where we plant trees, the colors of the houses, the type of driveways, how we're actually capturing and treating the runoff. We haven't gotten to that. We haven't gotten to that step yet because we need to get through this first general plan amendment and entitlement of the tentative map so we can actually proceed further with those more detailed designs, which would be the next step in the process. So maybe that's an opportunity to highlight or ask the geotechnical engineer to provide an opinion as to that kind of question.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from council?
Mayor, council, if
Yes.
I can, I just want to offer something for the council's consideration, and in particular to address an issue that I think has been brought forward by concerned residents, and that's in regards to vegetation management. This was an issue that was discussed by our planning commission, and I think the solution was, the proposed solution was to include measures in the CC&Rs or the covenants, codes, and restrictions as part of the HOA. Obviously, that the HOA wouldn't be formed until such time that a final map is actually approved and adopted and recorded. Obviously, there's an intervening time between a tentative map and a final map, and during that intervening time, that could be a number of years, which vegetation can continue to be an issue up there. You may want to, again, depending on your decision tonight relative to the entitlements that are being sought, include a condition requiring submittal of a vegetation management plan that addresses annual maintenance of vegetation for review and approval. You can certainly direct that to a subcommittee or to staff. I think that would be a good condition to include now so that the applicants put on notice that we're going to ask for that as a condition of continuing the tentative map. Obviously, ultimately, and should that suffice, that could be wrapped into and become part of the CC&Rs at some point in the future. But at least we would have a plan that addresses the annual maintenance and the fire hazards with the existing vegetation issue that you could direct staff to review as part of the approval of a tentative map, again, should you decide to do that. I do want to concur with the representative for the applicant, Mr. Doble, Mr. Thomas, regarding the entitlements that are being sought tonight. It really is a preliminary development plan. Some of the more specific design-related issues, I think, are things that are going to really come back before the council for review, particularly the entrance, the layout of the homes, the streetscape design as part of the precise development plan. And that will be another opportunity to kind of look at it, and we can certainly again, if council's so inclined, address some language around the issue of an appropriate amount of a bond that would address potential liability, and so that there's some more specificity around that. So I just wanted to give council some thoughts around that particular issue, because I think that's something that the community expressed and has expressed as issue of concern about the vegetation, and that might give you at least the community, some comfort to know that staff's empowered to address that as part of approval of the tentative map.
Councilmember Rincon, yes.
I definitely do agree that the bond should be looked at for clarity, as Melanie said, because we do have citizens that we need to take care of. And the vegetation issue also, I think, should be wrapped in there definitely, because I was pretty disappointed in that. That showed me a lack of caring for neighbors, and that bothers me. So, but those are the two big ones for me.
Okay. Anything else? I just also would like to make sure the HOA process, how that's going to work, the enforcement, failure to perform, and the city has to get involved, and who's going to pay for that, attorney fees. I mean, we really need to, because it's such a small complex, but there could be high costs associated with this small project. And I really want to make sure we understand that process. And I think if they don't perform as they're supposed to, I want to make sure that there's a mechanism that the city is going to step in, but they're going to also pay the cost for that step in.
Also time of the bond, how long the bond's going to be in place.
Yeah.
20 years, 30 years, whatever.
So it's not unheard of for, to make it a condition. I've done this with other jurisdictions, that the CC&Rs, I think the condition right now on the tentative map and our ordinance is that the city reviews them. We could make it a condition that the city must approve them. And there are other jurisdictions that have added something into the CC&Rs that actually specifically grant the city the right to enforce them.
Great.
Because, that can be, there's pros and cons to that, but that can be one more tool, because typically it's a civil issue and nothing happens with them unless the homeowners decide to enforce on each other. I am guessing with the private roads and the vegetation and all of that, that there's going to be a pretty hefty HOA fee in this neighborhood.
I bet.
And my experience has been CC&Rs do not get enforced very well by the residents. I really think in this situation, based on where it's located and the potential impacts to the whole area around it, it should be enforced by the city, or at least have the ability, whether it's either or, if they fail to perform, the city can perform. But I really think the city needs, and they need to pay for the city to do that, as far as the cost that we generate. Yeah, reimbursement.
One more, Joe.
Yes. Councilmember Wolter.
Thank you. I promise this will be my last question. We've gone on this too much. Kate, with respect to the HOA required to have a bond in place or any other mechanism that we decide would protect us, if they don't, what's the repercussion for them? Maybe they come back and say, we can't afford this bond anymore, and we're just not going to renew it.
Well, typically the bond would be posted prior to that. I mean, it's not like it's something that's taken care of at the forefront. So
I'm talking about the HOA.
Right.
Maybe 5 or 6 years from now.
The developer's required to cover that up front, is my understanding. So it wouldn't be something that the HOA would have to be contributing money to later, because it's already in place, and then if the
And it's on their real estate taxes, or however they do it.
The condition, does the condition state how many years the bond is in place?
10.
The condition for the council's reference is condition number 12 on page 218 of your packet. It does not specify the specific time frame.
I didn't see a date.
No, it doesn't have a date.
Amount of years.
Yeah. Okay.
So without a date, what does that mean, though?
I think that we should add a date.
I think so, too. Yeah. Okay. So the only other thing I just wanted to, again, touch on is the indemnification, and whether or not the disclosure should make sure that the people, that should be recorded as part of the sale, that the city isn't been indemnified. So I guess I'm thinking and I don't anticipate this ever happening, but I do worry that there could be something, one of these slides give way, and all of a sudden, in 10 years, the city is now in litigation because they allowed the project to go forward, and the buyer had no knowledge, or at least they alleged that at the time when they're in court, and we're trying to defend this. I think having a recorded indemnification would be important to have that, so they know. I mean, they've signed it, they understand it. It's not saying anything wrong, it's just saying in 10 years or 20 years, something happens that we hopefully won't happen. But if it does, they're on notice, and we should have that in the record, recorded. So, okay. So what's the pleasure of the council on this? We have 2 recommended resolutions, and I want to ask the city attorney, the best way, there's been a lot of input from the council. And if we do move forward with these two resolutions, it would have to include all those amendments, which...
Sure, there's been quite a few suggestions. I would suggest it might be prudent to take a short recess, and we could scratch out a little bit of language to amend some of the conditions and the conditions of approval that you would like to add.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know if this is the appropriate time or not, but I'm not going to support this project going forward any further than today, only because I just think there's too much potential liability for the city that's just not covered here. So,
So with that, what, 5 minutes, 10 minutes? Okay, let's take a 10-minute recess, and then when we come back, we will continue with this item.
You know, but nothing's happening. I don't know. Okay. We'll see.
What do you think?
Well,
you know, at least I had a hillside. It's great.
So it wasn't going in and giving that was it was but yeah. Exactly.
I got to sleep on this.
Earlier. Sorry. Oh,
Ross. How's Ross?
She's fine, I think today, touch wood, got better shape. So well, but they think they found out what the problem is.
Something simple?
Yeah, it actually turned out to be something very minor, but it still made a problem.
I know. Cindy has to go in. Blood transfusions tomorrow. They want to give her then Thursday she's got to go back to have still, yeah, it's really nice. But now she's, looking at it on today, the reason was she was having a problem with getting out of her right eye. She was lightheaded, headaches, and so they said, well, what's the issue? She did well. One down, they said, no, tomorrow, come on in. Just have to meet somebody, see how it was.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
They type in more match. Or practically for yeah, thank you. We already have it.
She puts up with you too.
I know, yeah, that's a challenge.
I thank you, I think my comments are really good.
So, maybe.
We may disagree on
I'm just concerned about when our council, when we're not up to
but it could make I guess we don't want to say evacuation harder and getting a
I don't want it that way.
Again, I think he was okay with it. Right. You know, is it really a process? Council or after and I think finish up that business, and then do the formal change, and then we'll plan on maybe cake cutting kind of thing.
I'm sorry, I just banged it. I didn't even see it there.
So,
Waiting for them to finish.
Melanie.
The boss wants you here.
Waiting for the high sign.
Who we waiting for? Kate?
Kate, we ready?
Sorry, you can go back.
Thank you, everybody. I think we're ready to proceed now. I'm going to ask our city attorney to walk through the conditions, if you would.
Sure. So based on what we gathered as consensus direction from council, if you all are to approve the resolution that includes the tentative map, the tentative map includes a long list of conditions of approval. There's currently 72, and staff is suggesting adding the following language to these, and I'm just going to read it into the record with the exception of the indemnification language. I'm not going to read that entire paragraph into the record. We've passed it out, and it's standard that we've put in other tentative maps. So we would propose that on condition 12, that the language be revised to read a bond in the minimum amount of $10 million up to a maximum amount of $15 million at city's discretion shall be posted by the developer to the HOA and remain in place for 10 years from the date of city's acceptance of improvements, so that in the event of a natural disaster such as a landslide, the HOA would have funds available to make necessary repairs. Then we are suggesting that on condition 13, it read, slide repair mitigation shall occur on the project site prior to issuance of any building permit for any dwelling unit on the property, comma, and city may engage additional appropriate professional oversight at applicant's cost to ensure this condition is met. We're suggesting that we add condition 13.5. Applicant shall submit a vegetation management plan within 90 days of today's date, October 23rd, 2018, and clear vegetation from site within 21 days of October 23rd, 2018. We're also suggesting condition 9 be amended to add, this is on the CC&Rs, to add a sentence, 2 sentences at the end that state, city shall review CC&Rs and have approval authority prior to recordation, period. CC&Rs shall include a provision permitting the city to enforce the CC&Rs at the HOA's cost. Sorry, you marked that for me, didn't you? Then we're also proposing at the very end a new header, miscellaneous, and then condition 73 be added that states indemnification language. This would be the indemnification language, standard indemnification language added to the tentative map that we've submitted to everyone. Condition 74 would state buyer disclosure shall include landslide mitigation documentation and city's indemnification status. And then condition of approval 75, applicant shall enter into a separate indemnification agreement with the city for a 10-year period related to landslide mitigation efforts. And 76, in the spirit of one of the comments from council, applicant shall explore the feasibility of building a small playground or pocket park within the project.
Okay. Is there anything else that council, that we may have missed here?
One thing that was brought up, I think, at Planning Commission was the fact that if there are kids up there in that development, there are no sidewalks to walk to get down to school. Whether that's an issue you guys want to discuss in any way, but it's going to be, because you know they're gonna, on bikes and, but at this point, there is nothing, I don't think, in the agreement that I saw about, or even if we could do that. Legally, I don't know, but that bothers me a little bit, because it's pretty close to the Jefferson School, so the kids are going to want to walk. Is that safe for them? Anybody else thought about that?
Yeah, well, we have several spots throughout the city that we've
We
been
do?
working on through
Yeah.
the Safe Routes to School, trying to get sidewalks in, so that is one there.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a good point. Okay, anything else on that? Any other comments? We have 2 proposed resolutions here. One is for adopting to mitigate negative declaration, mitigate monitoring and program. Would somebody
I'll
like
read the, Mr. Mayor, I'll read the resolution by title only. City of Cloverdale City Council Resolution Number 078-2018, a resolution of the City Council. There's a small area here that repeats. It says a resolution of the City Council, so just let's take that out. Make it resolution of the City Council. Adopting a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program, MMRP, for a preliminary development plan, tentative map, and general plan amendment to change the land use designation of the project site from rural residential to low-density residential to allow for a 33-lot single-family residential subdivision located on approximately 42.62 acres at the north end of the existing Vista View Drive. And then we have a whole lot of numbers. APNS 116-050-001, 116-060-012, 025, 027, 033, 063, 067, 001-350-005, and -038.
Do we have a second?
Second. As
Yeah.
amended, second.
That's what I was going to ask you. Okay. So that would be as amended?
As amended, yes, excuse me.
So we have a motion by Vice Mayor Russell, second by Councilmember Bagby. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter?
No.
Councilmember Bagby?
Aye.
Mayor Palla?
Aye.
And Eden?
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes, resolution passes. Okay, we have a second resolution. Somebody like to read that by title only?
Oh, by title only. City of Cloverdale, City Council Resolution Number 079-2018, a resolution of the City of Cloverdale City Council approving a preliminary development plan, tentative map, and general plan amendment, changing the land use designation of the project site from rural residential to low-density residential and allowing for a 33-lot single-family residential subdivision located on approximately 42.62 acres at the north end of the existing, it's Vista View, not Vist View, that's fine, Drive, APNs 116-050-001, 116-060-012, 025, 027, 033, 063, 067, 001, 350-005, and 038 as amended.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, so motion by Councilmember Bagby, Vice Mayor Russell, second. Any discussion on the motion?
No, sir.
Okay, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell?
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter?
No.
Councilmember Bagby?
Aye.
Mayor Palla?
Aye.
Eden?
Aye.
Okay. Vote pass. Thank you, everybody. We will move on. Okay. Next item on the agenda is item number 12, new business, consideration of resolution number 080-2018, amending the buyer's occupancy and resale restrictions agreement for 324 Moonlight Circle. Okay, who's going to take that? City manager? Okay, assistant city manager.
Mayor, council members, this item is a request from Russell Hatcher to amend his affordable housing agreement he entered into with the city in 2007 for the purchase of 334 Moonlight Drive. Mr. Hatcher has stated that under his current agreement, he's unable to access equity he needs to complete some improvements and work on the house. In the back of your packet is his letter requesting this, this item. So a little background, the house was built to satisfy the city's inclusionary housing ordinance, which requires either the construction of affordable housing or the payment of a fee. And just a point of clarification, in the staff report, it says that the Sunrise Hills 2 development was required to do 2 inclusionary units. That was correct. Doing a little research, we found out that both units were constructed, but after a year and a half of marketing the second unit and using the help of nonprofits, the developer was unable to find a qualified family and made an arrangement with the city to pay the in lieu fees for the second unit. So that unit never entered into any affordable housing agreements. The payment was made instead. The current agreement requires the applicant to either, one, sell to a moderate income family as they were when they purchased the unit, or sell at a restricted sales price. The proposed amendment would allow the applicant to sell the house at market rate and split the equity with the city. And this proposal is an 80-20 split, which is used commonly in other cities in these types of arrangements. One thing to keep in mind is that if others, there are 6, we found 6 other agreements very similar to this one in town. If any of those folks came in and asked for this request, we would have to grant that to them. Most of those are found on Timber Ridge Court. I also want to point out that the city never made a financial contribution to construct this house or to allow the Hatchers to purchase the home. It was strictly our inclusionary housing ordinance that compelled the developer to sell it at a lower price than they normally would. And I have numbers that we can get into if the council would like to, but that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions from council?
I have had 2 phone calls from 2 other people that are in similar situations that are very interested in how we're going to do this tonight because they are next in line.
Good.
So we would have to expect that we're going to get probably all of them.
Good. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. Anything else? Any questions? Council?
Well, just a couple of things. You know, Kevin was absolutely right. There are 6 others, all in that same Al King development. And once again, you know, I'm in favor of this. I think it kind of hamstrings all the buyers. When we did this in 2005, I believe we put this package together under Mr. Kibbe and Karen Samushu. I can never pronounce that, I'm sorry. You know, it seemed like a good thing, but now in retrospect, it's just too cost prohibitive for the owner. There's no incentive for anyone to do any improvements to the property. So I'd really like to see us move forward with this, and I understand that there are others, Maryann, and there are other programs we have out there as well, not just this type.
Yeah, I also got some calls from some of the guys in the sweat equity housing, and they are also very interested in this. They want in.
Yeah.
And they've actually put a lot of sweat equity. They helped build those homes.
Right, right.
And I said I didn't know how this was all going to happen, but that I felt like if we did approve this tonight, that they would be in line.
Yeah, that's something we probably should look at in addition to this type of funding.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there.
Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, whatever we decide tonight, we have to be sure. I think we should be pretty comfortable with it because it's setting the tone for all of the other requests. So just being consistent and being fair is, I think, the most important thing we can do.
Sure. Okay. Any other comments from council? And I do, you know, before I open it up, I'll just give my comments. I think really they all do need to be looked at. I don't think the intent of the inclusionary housing was to keep the house, the property owner in the house for 20 years and not have the ability to do any home improvements because there's no equity for them to work with. I don't think that's what the intent of this whole thing was for. It was to provide housing for people that live and work here that need homes, and we wanted to try to make affordable homes. So I do think, even though there's others, I think really the whole program really needs to be reviewed, and I think there needs to be some modifications when appropriate. So I'm going to open it up, but go ahead, City Attorney, before we do that.
When you say the program, are you there? Because we have the ordinance.
There's different
and then we have
ways
the agreements. Yeah. So one suggestion our office had was that might be simpler than, kind of just lifting the restriction, because then you lose all the units, would be to take a look at the ordinance and take a really good look at the interest, like take a look at the formula in terms of the income qualifiers to up the amount so that, monthly payments can be not just, right now it's restricted, I think, at 30% of the income amounts. That could be upped. You could do other things to reshape all the agreements to an equity share. That equity share agreements, like the amendment that's suggested here, are common, but they also start out at the very beginning, from the get-go. And this one, I just wanted to mention, if you want the numbers, it's it's something like the purchase price on this, I believe, was about 307. Yep. Comparables at that time were going in the sixes. So there's, something other than just, there's other considerations here, I would say, in terms of this complying with the spirit of your ordinance. So you might want to schedule a time later to look at the ordinance as a whole. If you don't think it's meeting your needs and the purpose of the program, because it's too restrictive. There's other ways to loosen up that ordinance, I think.
Okay, good.
Yeah, we need to, so I just want to say, Mr. Mayor, we need to look at the ordinance.
I agree.
We really do, and decide what we really want it to do.
And also, I don't want to lose these affordable units, but I do understand what the Hatchers are going through. And so maybe also, how long have you guys been in the house? You said? 07. Okay, so a long time. So maybe we could also look at the idea of length of time. So like, say, if somebody's in a house for 10 years or 20 years or whatever, that they can gain more equity over time. But I would hate to just blanketly say that we're going to just change them all.
Sure.
Because we are going to have everybody that's in one of, the sweat equity, all of them. We will lose those homes for affordability. And some of them fairly recently have sold, a couple that I know of, and that wouldn't be possible then.
You're talking the ones in Iole Ranch and in Citrus Gardens.
Yeah, all of those, yeah. And we've got to be fair all the way across the board, but I see, and especially length of time, I think people do deserve to be able to gain more equity over time.
The longer they live there, yes.
There is also we have something, this is just one small thing, but the agreement does call for a good condition bump. So if the city decides the home's in good condition and they've given us notice, hey, we want to sell, they get a 10% bump in the max sales price. So in this case, it would add somewhere between 30 and around 30 plus grand that they would be able to sell it beyond that restricted sales price. It's not a huge additional equity, but it is something. It's money. It's something more.
So Kevin?
Mayor, I'd like to just point out that we're going to, at the next council meeting, we're bringing forward the inclusionary housing fee. So that could be our start of our discussion of the entire inclusionary housing ordinance. The consultant's going to come up and walk us through what we're proposing as the new fee based on the new numbers and the new study. And then the second thing I'd like to point out to Councilmember Brigham, the idea of the length is actually a really good one in my opinion. I know that Burbank Housing was using that model where if you sold within the first 7 years, you had a restricted sales price.
Right.
After 7, it went into sort of a more of an equity share.
That's fair. To me, that's fair.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
And it repays, and it helps to repay the people who have
Right.
put up the money to put you there and to begin with and administrate that money over the years. So we have to be fair to everybody, including taxpayers.
Okay, so before I open it up, any other comments for?
No.
Okay, I'm going to open this up. Anybody in the audience that would like to address the city council on this item, this is the time to do that. Please come forward, sign the book, and state your name for the record. Okay, seeing no one rise, I'll close the public input and bring it back to council. And staff is asking for direction on this, so.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to offer the resolution by title only. That is City of Cloverdale City Council Resolution Number 080-2018, a resolution of the Cloverdale City Council amending the buyer's occupancy and resale restriction agreement between the city and Russell and Tina Hatchett.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion. Councilmember Wolter, second by Councilmember Bagby. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brigham?
Yes, I'm confused now. I'm going to have to say no, because we're talking about bringing this back and discussing the whole thing, but now we're setting a precedence.
Well, we're setting a precedence for this type of agreement that we have, not for all of them.
They're all the same.
No, I don't think they are.
Exactly the same,
Are they?
that's my understanding,
Yeah.
The Iole Ranch and the Citrus Gardens are all the same.
No, they're not.
Iole Ranch and
It's not the
Citrus
same
Gardens
arrangement.
are a different type of affordability agreement.
Yes.
I think
They're-
what the
they're
reference
down.
is that the other inclusionary ordinance agreements within Sunrise Hills are the same. So all of those will then be subject to change by the city so that we are consistent in our approach.
Okay. Upon request? Yeah.
It could be upon request, it could be directed that we directly outreach to those citizens and offer this so that we're treating them equally.
Legally, we'd almost have to outreach to everyone, to be fair.
Okay, so we have a motion second, and we're on a roll call vote, and you're no. Go ahead, City Clerk.
Well, you know, I'm prepared to vote yes and move forward with it.
Yeah.
We're going to have to face this sooner or later, and I think it will be fair on everyone. Okay. And then from here on in, we need to decide what we're going to do. Let's accept what will happen with what we've got.
For all new.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's not fair.
Councilmember Wolter?
Aye.
Councilmember Bagby?
Aye.
And Mayor Palla?
Aye.
Eden?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And I think it's important that we do look at all of them. And I think that needs to come back, and it needs to be rectified. But I think it's over-restricted the way it is. So, okay, we'll
So
move
are
on.
we going to do the same thing with like Iole Ranch and those guys too? Write them letters that we are reconsidering?
I think at this point, the whole program's going to be taking a look at the ordinance that regulates it.
Okay.
What subcommittee would do that?
Planning, well, no.
We brought this item to the planning subcommittee.
Okay. Okay. So if we can make sure we get that on the agenda, it needs to be looked at and fixed, so.
Okay.
All right, we'll move on to subcommittee items. We have Public Works.
There's one more, item 13.
That's where I'm at.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Subcommittee items.
I'm sorry.
Read it.
Committee.
It's confusing me.
Yeah.
Okay, subcommittee items, Public Works, item number 13, consideration of a draft financing plan for the South Cloverdale Boulevard Treadway Signalization Project. So,
Mayor, Council, I'll start on this item and then turn it over to our Finance Manager and Public Works Director for any follow-up questions. A little bit of background on this project. The Council directed staff to enter into an agreement with W-Trans, our traffic consultant, to evaluate the feasibility of a traffic signal for South Cloverdale Boulevard at the Treadway and Santana intersections. As Council knows, there's been a lot of concern expressed over time about traffic conditions in that area, particularly traffic safety conditions and turning movements. As part of that analysis, W-Trans did identify the need for a dual signalization at those two intersections, both at Santana Drive as well as at Treadway. On August 14th, W-Trans provided a presentation to Council on the overall project, the layout, the design, the components, as well as the anticipated cost of the project. At that time, the staff did not include or provide a presentation on how we would anticipate financing the project, and Council directed staff to bring back a financing plan. What we've done for you in this agenda report is provide an overview of the cost estimate, which was presented to you at the August 14th council meeting. There were some additional costs that we've included to identify to be able to bring this project forward. That includes adding a construction management cost to the overall cost estimate, which brings the total estimated cost for bringing this project forward of $875,000. What we've done in the agenda report is identify funding sources for carrying out the proposed project. Those include some funds that are identified in reserve accounts that have been set aside by previous development projects and are identified as traffic safety and FERBR signalization. Just want to note that those particular funding sources are part of your fund balance for your general fund. So at the point in time, if those funds are used for the project, it would bring down your general fund reserve. In addition, staff has identified use of the Streets and Thoroughfare Impact Fee Fund. What's identified in the agenda report is roughly $550,000. That's pretty much the 100% of what's available in that fund to be able to carry out this project. in addition to what we've identified as what's called an impact fee receivable. Currently, Vine Ridge Senior Assisted Living Development hasn't paid all of their impact fees, which are due at the time or prior to final issuance of a certificate of occupancy. They paid 25% up front, and they're going to pay the remaining 75%. What's included in the agenda report is what we have calculated is due from that development project at the time that they final the project, which is, as you know, is under construction and is, moving forward. Last but not least, we've included funding from a grant source that's referred to as TDA Article 3 funds. That's the Transportation Development Act. Those particular funds are earmarked for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. One of the key elements of this project is the green bike lanes, as well as some pedestrian improvements in terms of the striping, as well as some of the signalization that would occur to support pedestrian movements in that area. And we did get concurrence from Sonoma County Transportation Agency that this is an appropriate use for those grant funds that are specifically earmarked to the city of Cloverdale. We would have to apply for those funds, and that would be expected that we would do that in early 2019 when those funds, when they issue a notice of availability. And so with all that said, we did, to kind of close the budget gap on this, we did identify an additional general fund contribution of approximately $15,000. And so with all those various funding sources commingled, we've put together what we think is adequate funds to finance the project. Obviously, in terms of key next steps, is really to complete the design of the project, which our city engineer is coordinating with Debbie Trans on the final design so that the project could be let to bid. Ultimately, once the project is put out to bid, that's when we receive formal cost estimates from contractors, and that would ultimately have to come back to council for award of a bid to qualified contractor. And it's at that time we'd really know what the true cost of the project is. Obviously, there's lots of potential variation in the costs, but we've done our best to identify, through engineers' estimates, what we anticipate the cost would be and what are the different cost elements to bring this project forward. And what we're asking tonight is, one, support for the financing plan and to proceed with the project in terms of completing the final design and putting the project out to bid. And we wanted to make sure you're aware of what we've developed in terms of this financing plan and request your support for that and moving forward with the project.
Thank you. Any questions from council?
Nope. Excited.
Okay. Would anybody in the audience like to address the city council on this item? This would be the time to do so. Okay, seeing no one rise, I'll close the public input, bring it back to council.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move approval.
Okay. Vice Mayor Russell.
I'll second.
And Councilmember Brigham seconds. Any discussion on that?
Nope.
Okay. Give us a roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Brigham,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Russell,
Aye.
Councilmember Wolter,
Aye.
Councilmember Bagby,
Aye.
Mayor Palla,
Aye.
and Edith.
Aye.
And I just want to thank staff. I know money is tight and going through all the accounts, making this work, but this is a critically important project and long overdue. So really happy to see it move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to just acknowledge both City Engineer Mark Rincon for his work on keeping this project moving forward, as well as our Finance Manager Susie Holmes on putting together this financing plan.
Great. Well, thank you all.
Thanks.
Very well done.
Okay, we'll move on to subcommittee reports, starting with the airport. Our chair is Councilmember Bagby.
Our next meeting is to be determined.
Okay. Finance, Administration, and Police. Our chair is Councilmember Brigham.
The next meeting is going to be this Thursday, the 25th, at 6 o'clock at the Senior Center.
Very good.
Are you going to be there?
I'm going to be there late. So I'll be there by the time, I'm going to be here until 6:30.
Okay.
And then I'll come back over there.
And just for the public, homelessness is going to be one of the agenda items to be discussed, so.
And it's going to be a heck of a meeting, I can tell you that.
Mayor,
Yes.
if I can just add, one of the items that's going to be on the Finance, Admin, and Police Subcommittee is going to be a presentation about the Cloverdale Cemetery. We've been lucky to have a genealogist work on cataloging all of the grave sites at the cemetery over a 2-year period. This is going to be an opportunity for her to present this really significant body of work that she's worked on at no cost to the city. And that'll probably take up, I've asked her to, kind of keep the presentation brief. Ultimately, it'll be up to the subcommittee if you'd like to refer it to council to have her present to council as well. But I just wanted to kind of note that because I think it's a really significant effort by a resident in our community that's undertaking this work at our cemetery.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the Planning and Community Development. Our chair is Councilmember Bagby.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we met on, when did we meet? The 23rd? I'll just do you want a brief update. In fact, it was so dense that I just went ahead and included it in my council report, but I'll just hit some of the highlights. Since there were several items that we touched on, probably what you're going to be most interested in is we did receive an update on the 6-acre water company, South Cloverdale Water Company issue, and just basically city staff is going to be participating in the ongoing discussions, and that should just be a source of unending fun for everyone. We also got an update on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and the Potter Valley relicensing, and I just have a short update for you. I've been speaking with Adrienne Garialdi of Russian River Confluence, and she's trying to put together an informal group of staff and electeds from Mendocino and Northern Sonoma County to just discuss our options and continue monitoring it, because we are on a very tight time frame on the auction process, as we have 18 months left. So we really need to get our arms around what that means. And at this point, because we're so many electeds who are traveling, and James Gore has information and Carrie Brown has information, it's probably, the initial meeting is probably going to be a conference call, and I'll probably go to City Hall so that at least I can attend with Kevin and David more than likely. It's impossible to get all these people in the same room together. And also, since there's been some interest from the public on the consideration of a polystyrene ban, I just wanted to let the council know that Sonoma County Waste Management is still working on this countywide ordinance. You probably read in the PD that Sebastopol went ahead and proactively approved theirs. Those apparently there were several good notes and good improvements that the Sonoma County Waste Management staff was enthusiastic about, so it is going to come back to Sonoma County Waste Management at the November 7th meeting, and staff anticipates that the Board of Supervisors will adopt it sometime in 2019, pending their schedule, and then Cloverdale and all of the other cities in the county will get that finely tuned version for our consideration. So just to let council and the public know that that is in the works. We also just briefly discussed the Eureka Public Arts Program, the fact that the Economic Development Director is willing to come down and do a presentation, but Kevin and I agreed it's probably best to push that into next year. So we kind of have a full plate between now and January, and that's it for my report.
Thank you. Okay, move on to Public Works. Our chair is Vice Mayor Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our next meeting is November 27th, 10:30 a.m. at City Hall.
Thank you. And the Joint City Fire District, and that would be mine, and our next meeting is to be determined as well. Joint City School District, and that would be mine, and our next meeting is to be determined. So we need to get those scheduled. So now we move on to council reports. I'd like to start with our student liaison, Eden. You're up. And welcome.
Thank you. I'm Eden Winniford. So at the high school, the boys soccer team will be going to playoffs. Yay. And the cross country team will progress to the Northern Coastal section, which is their version of playoffs. And whether the girls' soccer team is able to go to playoffs is going to be determined by their game today. So I haven't heard the outcome, but if they won, then they're going to playoffs too, and that's great. The varsity football team may also go to playoffs, depending on the outcome of their away game against Middletown this Friday. And Grace Messenger on the girls' soccer team is ranked #1 in the league, as is Peyton Collard for the cross-country team. So we have 2 number 1s. This year, there are 3 newly active clubs on campus: the California Scholarship Federation, Cloverdale High School Fashion Club, and the Gay Straight Alliance. And we should be seeing more events and fundraisers from these clubs in the community as they branch out. And lastly, there will be an art show at the Cloverdale Performing Arts Center here, featuring art made by students in the AP art class at the high school on Friday, October 26th from 4 to 6 p.m.
Great, well, thank you. Good report. Okay, city council report. Any city council member have anything besides what's in the packet?
No, I have an amendment.
Okay.
Sorry, I just left it off my list. Also on October 17th, I did walk the Vista Oaks property with Casey Clement. So my edit is here for you, Linda.
Very good. Thank you. Anybody else?
I have a
Vice
quick
Mayor.
amendment too. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On October 18th, I had a second meeting, and this one was the one with Casey Clement relative to the Vista View project. And I wanted to be sure to include that, so it's on the record.
Great. Thank you. Councilmember Brigham?
Just one announcement. I'd like to invite everyone here and the public to the announcement party this Thursday at 5:30, and that's in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce Business After Hours. So we're going to be announcing Thursday night our new season for next year and selling season tickets at a discount. So be here.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to legislative reports. Anything? Nothing? Okay. City manager report?
No reports, Mayor.
Okay. City attorney? All right.
Yes.
Council direction on any future items? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make a note. We have received a couple of letters from an individual or individuals in the Tarman. The letters don't have names attached. But the Public Works Department had discussed this briefly when we had the first letter. And one of the things I would like to suggest for a future agenda item is that we invite, if we can, the folks at Tarman to a neighborhood meeting. I think it'd be very important to discuss this so we really find out who is writing the letters and how deep the concern is. But also, it's always helpful if we let people understand the financing. There was reference in the letter, which I can certainly understand, to you're building a skate park and you're building this and you're doing that, and why aren't you fixing the streets? As somebody who, among other things, fights always for us to get more money for our streets from all the gas taxes we pay, and hopefully we will renew that gas tax, otherwise we'll really be stuck. I understand that people don't know that this is one big pile of money that we all have, and you just kind of dole it out like some general fund, the way you might your budget at home. So I think it would do a great deal of good if we had planned for next year. I don't think it's something we need to do immediately. And it's not because I'm not running for office that I'm suggesting this. I will attend, I promise, and I'll help it any way I can. But I would like to do that. Secondly, very quick, we have an emergency preparedness ad hoc, and we've been moving ahead with that. We did not have a meeting this month because my schedule, I know, Councilmember Wolters have been kind of jammed, but I have a great interest in making sure that when we, or when this council decides who will replace me, for example, on that ad hoc, that we also set a specific date and time, so we have a time every month when we're going to meet. And I also want to put in a personal plug for the siren suggestion. It's something I agree with 100%. And I know Shirley Jane's been working hard on that too. Anyway, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if I could piggyback on that for 1 second, Mr. Mayor. David, I know we've spoken about having some of the planning commissioners, the ones that really want to get involved on some of these ad hoc committees. So it would be nice when Carol leaves if we have a couple planning commissioners on that so that they know what's going on. And then lastly, can we recycle these? Okay.
Okay. So that means we're at the very last item on the agenda, which is we're going to adjourn the regular meeting till our next meeting is Tuesday, November 13th. Our closed session is set at 5 o'clock in the City Hall Conference Room. Our public, the business meetings here at the Performing Arts Center at 6 p.m. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Staff, thank you for all your hard work. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Sir.
Good meeting.
Thank you, Joe.